The members of the Galactic Council sat in their grand chamber, blue light reflecting off their various forms. Some had scales, others tentacles, and a few glowed with inner energy. They gathered around a circular table reviewing reports from across the galaxy. "Next item," said Counselor June, tapping his silver pad. "Sector 7, Planet Earth. The primates have achieved basic space travel within their system." Counselor Nari flicked through the report with a bored gesture. "Another developing world. Nothing special. Barely worth our monitoring resources." "They call themselves humans," said June. "They show unusual tendencies in their construction projects." "How so?" asked Counselor Min, his crystalline form shifting colors with interest. "They build things larger than needed. Their early civilizations constructed massive stone monuments when simple markers would have served the same purpose." Min's form flickered briefly. "Interesting but ultimately insignificant. They will mature beyond such wasteful tendencies once they join the galactic community." "Motion to maintain minimal observation status?" asked June. The council agreed unanimously. Humans were merely a curiosity. 50 years later, the council received an urgent alert. Earth had achieved faster than light travel. This was centuries ahead of the council's predictions. At the welcoming ceremony, Ambassador Tai of the council greeted the human representatives with the standard diplomatic package: access to basic galactic trade routes, introductory technology exchanges, and cultural orientation materials. The humans seemed grateful but strangely confident for newcomers. "We look forward to learning from the galactic community," said Human Ambassador G, "and to sharing our own approaches to solving problems." Ambassador Ta smiled politely. All new species said similar things, unaware of how primitive their solutions usually were. In the following months, human ships appeared at various trading hubs. They asked many questions about stellar engineering and planetary resources. Most species found these queries amusing. After all, true planetary engineering was the domain of only the most advanced civilizations, those with millions of years of development. Admiral Park of the Earth Space Force proposed something called the Earth Mover Project in a public address that was intercepted by council monitors. The project description seemed absurd: hollowing out Mercury, Earth's innermost planet, to create a mobile defensive platform. "They cannot be serious," said Counselor Nari when the report crossed her desk. "This is theoretical posturing to establish themselves among the galactic powers." "Their history suggests otherwise," said June, now head of the Human Affairs Division. "These humans have a pattern of undertaking projects that other rational species would consider impossible or wasteful. Even so, converting a planet into a vessel, the energy requirements alone would bankrupt their entire system. No civilization has attempted such a thing until reaching at least Class 4 status. The humans are barely Class 1. The council voted to ignore the proposal as empty boasting. They assigned a single monitoring satellite to Mercury, more as a formality than from any real concern. 3 years passed. Council attention focused elsewhere as conflicts in distant sectors required mediation. Then, on a quiet rotation, every alarm in the monitoring center began to sound at once. Technician Hyun stared at his screen in disbelief. "This cannot be right," he whispered, running diagnostics on the sensors. When the results came back verified, he hit the emergency alert. Within an hour, the full council had assembled. The holographic display in the center of their chamber showed Mercury, but not as it should be. The planet's surface was now covered with massive structural reinforcements. Enormous engine arrays protruded from its southern hemisphere. Most shocking of all, the planet was no longer in its expected orbit. "It moved," said June, his voice barely audible. "They actually did it. They converted a planet into a ship." The images updated in real time as Mercury, now designated by humans as the Leviathan-class dreadnought, executed another controlled burn. Its new engines glowed with impossible power as the planet ship adjusted its position. "How?" demanded Nari. "How could they achieve this? Their energy production capacity shouldn't allow for such a project for at least 800 more years. Specialist Sung stepped forward, her research team having worked through the night to analyze the data. They didn't follow conventional approaches, Counselor, where our species would build incrementally, testing each phase. The humans committed fully to the end vision. She displayed new images showing the interior of Mercury. They hollowed out nearly 60% of the planet's mass, converting the material into structural supports and engine components. They redirected asteroids for additional resources. Most significantly, they developed a new form of fusion reactor that operates at scales we considered theoretically impossible. "Is it a weapon?" asked Min, his crystalline form now pulsing red with alarm. "It appears to be a multipurpose platform," replied Sung. "Certainly capable of offensive operations, but also designed for defensive positioning. The human broadcasts refer to it as humanity's shield and our guarantee of independence." The council chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Humans had not only joined the galactic community, but had immediately established themselves as a major power. Their approach to engineering, focusing on scale and power rather than efficiency, had bypassed centuries of incremental development. "We must reassess everything we thought we knew about humans," said June finally. "They don't think like other species. Where we see limitations, they see challenges. Where we proceed carefully, they leap forward." In their observation room on the Leviathan, Admiral Park and his team watched the frantic communications from the Galactic Council with quiet satisfaction. "They never believed we could do it," said Engineer Jin, looking at the displays showing the successful engine test. "No one ever does," replied Park, gazing out the viewport at the stars. "That's our greatest advantage." He turned to his crew, people who had worked tirelessly for years to achieve what the galaxy had deemed impossible. Humanity has always built on a scale that defies reason. From the ancient pyramids to orbital colonies to this. He gestured at the massive control room around them. "We think differently. We build differently. And now, the galaxy will have to accept that." On his command screen, requests for diplomatic meetings from the Council were already pouring in. The galaxy had noticed humanity at last, and nothing would ever be the same. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from all corners of the galaxy filled the chamber, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of evolutionary paths. Some floated in specially designed gravity fields. Others stood on mechanical legs. A few existed as pure energy contained in crystal matrices. At the center of it all stood High Counselor Yul, his crystalline body catching the light and sending rainbow patterns across the walls. Unlike the usual slow, deliberate movements of his species, today his appendages trembled visibly. "This emergency session is now in order," announced Yul, his voice resonating through the chamber. The noise immediately died down as all eyes, sensory organs, and perception fields focused on the central hologram. The image showed Mercury, or what had once been Mercury. The planet was barely recognizable. Its surface now bore a complex network of titanium reinforcement. Massive engine ports dotted its southern hemisphere, glowing with the unmistakable blue light of advanced fusion reactions. "This," said Yul, pointing at the hologram, "violates every principle of spatial engineering we have established over 15,000 years of galactic cooperation." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Many representatives were seeing the images for the first time. Some had believed the reports to be exaggerations. "The humans have been members of our community for less than a century," continued Yul. "They should barely be capable of establishing colonies beyond their home system. Instead, they have converted an entire planet into a mobile platform." Ambassador Du of the Aquatic Alliance rose from her water tank. Could this be some form of deception? Perhaps an illusion to establish their importance. "I wish it were," replied Yul. "Our sensor arrays have confirmed it. Mercury has changed its orbital position under its own power. The humans have accomplished what was thought impossible." Specialist Sue from Terran Affairs stepped forward. a small woman with round glasses and a data pad. She looked almost comically ordinary among the exotic beings that filled the chamber. "The humans call it the Leviathan class," Sue reported, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Our analysis shows it combines elements of a defensive platform, habitat, and potential offensive weapon system." She displayed detailed scans on the hologram, pointing out key features. "Their engineering approach is fundamentally unorthodox, where galactic standard practices focus on efficiency and minimal resource consumption. They simply overpower problems." "Explain," demanded Representative Kwan of the Machine Collective, his metallic voice echoing. "Consider the power systems," Sue said, highlighting the engine complexes. "Standard doctrine would call for precise, efficient reactors scaled to exact power requirements. The human approach was to build fusion reactors 50 times larger than needed and run them at partial capacity. It's wasteful, imprecise, but undeniably effective." The hologram shifted to show the interior of Mercury. Vast chambers had been hollowed out, reinforced with structures that seemed unnecessarily robust. "They built it to last millennia," Sue continued. "Most of our emergency vessels are designed for a few centuries of operation before recycling. This is built as if they expected to survive stellar evolution." What terrified the Council wasn't just the scale of the project, but the speed. Humanity had accomplished in decades what their most advanced civilizations projected would require thousands of years of technological evolution. "Most concerning," Sue added, her voice dropping slightly, "is what our intelligence networks have intercepted. This appears to be merely the first in a planned series." The chamber erupted in alarmed conversations. Yeol had to strike his resonance staff 3 times to restore order. "What do they intend?" asked Ambassador Wu of the Photonic Consciousness, her light form flickering with concern. "Their official statements describe it as a defensive measure," replied Sue. "A quote from their Admiral Park calls it humanity's insurance policy in an uncertain galaxy. However, the potential for offensive deployment cannot be ignored." Representative Jin of the Elder Worlds, one of the oldest species present, spoke for the first time. His ancient voice carried weight that immediately silenced the room. "We have seen this pattern before," Jin said slowly. "Young species with remarkable technological leaps. Usually they burn brightly and fade quickly. Their resource management proves unsustainable." "With respect," countered Sue, "humanity appears to have found solutions to the resource questions. They've developed asteroid mining techniques that harvest resources at rates we considered theoretically impossible. They're not depleting their system, they're transforming it." The implications hung in the air. A young species with the ability to convert planets into ships could fundamentally alter the balance of power that had maintained peace for thousands of years. "We must vote," declared Yeol after a heady silence. "I propose an immediate diplomatic mission with a clear demand. The humans must cease this dangerous escalation." The voting was nearly unanimous. Only the representatives from the 3 youngest galactic members abstained, perhaps seeing their own futures reflected in humanity's rise. As the council disbanded, Specialist Sue found herself approached by Elder Jin in a quiet corridor. "You've studied these humans closely," Jin said, his ancient eyes searching her face. "Do you believe they will listen to our demands?" Sue considered the question carefully. Humans have a complex relationship with authority, especially external authority. They respect strength and determination. "You didn't answer my question," Jin observed. "No," Sue admitted quietly. "I don't believe they will stop. What terrifies me is that I'm not certain they're wrong. Their approach is different, but their results." She trailed off, thinking of the impossible achievement orbiting where Mercury once was. Jin nodded slowly. "Then we must prepare for a new era. The galaxy has been comfortable for too long." As they parted ways, the image of the Leviathan remained displayed in the council chamber, a silent testament to humanity's refusal to accept limitations. The diplomatic mission would depart within days, carrying what might be the most crucial message in recent galactic history. "Stop what you're doing. or face the consequences. But in the privacy of her quarters, Specialist Sue wondered who, exactly, would be facing consequences if humans refused. The species that could move a planet might not be so easily intimidated by even the combined might of the galaxy. The great observation deck of the Leviathan stretched in a perfect arc, its transparent ceiling revealing the endless black of space. Admiral Kim stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the approaching shuttle. The vessel carried representatives from the Galactic Council. It looked absurdly small against the backdrop of Mercury's transformed surface. Admiral Kim had not slept well for 3 nights. At 56, she had dedicated her entire adult life to the Earthmover project. What had begun as a theoretical exercise in her youth had become humanity's greatest achievement. Now, that achievement was under threat. "They're coming faster than expected," said Director Lee, stepping beside her at the viewport. He was younger than Kim by nearly 20 years, but the stress of the project had etched lines around his eyes that made him look older. "Their engines are impressive," Kim noted, watching the shuttle's approach pattern. "Efficient, elegant even." "They're here to tell us to stop," Lee said quietly. Kim nodded, her expression calm despite the tension in her shoulders. "Because they can't do what we've done." The shuttle docked with perfect precision at Airlock 7, the one specially designed for alien visitors with different atmospheric needs. Kim and Lee waited in the formal reception chamber. Behind them stood 5 other humans, the top scientists and strategists of the Leviathan project. When the door finally opened, Kim's first thought was how beautiful the aliens were. The delegation consisted of 5 beings from different species. The leader appeared crystalline, light playing through his form with each movement. Another resembled a tall, elegant insect with iridescent wings folded against its back. The third floated in what looked like a personal gravity field, its gaseous body swirling with colors. The fourth was nearly human in appearance except for the silver skin and eyes that seemed to see in all directions. The fifth remained partially hidden in an environmental suit, only glowing eyes visible behind a dark visor. "Admiral Kim," said the crystalline being, his voice translated through a small device at what might be called his neck. "I am High Counselor Yol of the Galactic Council. Thank you for receiving us." Kim bowed slightly. "Welcome aboard the Leviathan. This is Director Lee, our chief engineer, and other members of our leadership team." The formalities were brief. Within minutes, they moved to the conference room, where refreshments suitable for all physiologies had been prepared. Kim noted how the aliens seemed to examine everything, their eyes lingering on the structural supports and material choices. "This is quite remarkable," said the silver-skinned alien, running a hand along the conference table. "This material, it's derived from Mercury's core." "Yes," replied Lee. "We developed a process to reconstitute the nickel iron into a molecular lattice that's stronger than traditional alloys." The insectoid being's antennae twitched. Impressive, but at what cost? The resource expenditure must have been astronomical. Kim sensed the shift in tone. The pleasantries were over. "High Counselor," she said, addressing Yol directly, "I suspect you didn't come all this way to discuss our material science achievements." Yol's crystalline form seemed to stiffen. "You are correct, Admiral. We are here on serious business." He placed a small device on the table that projected a hologram of the Mercury dreadnought, the Leviathan, as seen from outside. "This vessel," Yol continued, "represents an unprecedented escalation in military capability. The Council has voted unanimously to insist that you cease this project immediately." The silver-skinned alien leaned forward. "Your species has been part of the galactic community for less than a century. There are protocols, gradual steps of technological integration. This," he gestured at the walls around them, "bypasses millennia of careful development." For the next hour, the delegation presented a series of arguments, each building on the last. They spoke of resource conservation principles that had maintained galactic stability for thousands of years. They detailed spatial rights frameworks that governed how celestial bodies could be modified. They outlined the dangers of unchecked militarization, particularly by younger species without the perspective that comes with longevity. Kim and her team listened without interruption. She noticed Lee's fingers tightening on his datapad when the alien suggested humanity wasn't mature enough to handle such power. She saw Chief Weapons Officer Choi bite her lip when they described the Leviathan as unnecessarily threatening. But no one spoke until the delegation had finished. When the last alien fell silent, all eyes turned to Kim. She took a moment, looking at each delegate in turn. "You've traveled a long way to tell us what we cannot do," she said finally, her voice soft but clear. "I respect your concern. I understand your fear, but there's something you need to understand about humanity." She stood and walked to the viewport, gesturing for them to join her. From this angle, Earth was visible as a small blue dot in the distance. The Leviathan isn't just a warship, it's humanity's insurance policy, Kim said. For thousands of years, we developed on a world with no guidance, constantly threatened by extinction. Natural disasters, pandemics, our own violent tendencies. We faced it all alone. She turned to face them directly. We learned to think beyond limitations because we had to. Every great leap in our history came when someone refused to accept what everyone else called impossible. The gaseous being swirled with what might have been agitation. But planetary conversion is exactly the kind of thinking that kept us alive, Kim interrupted. This vessel represents our commitment to survival, not just as individuals, but as a species. Lee stepped forward, adding, "Your species evolved in stable environments, or had mentors to guide your development. Humanity had neither. We survived by overbuilding, by creating redundancies, by planning for worst-case scenarios." The insectoid being's wings fluttered slightly. The Council cannot allow such unchecked power. The potential for destabilization. "The potential," said Kim, "is far greater than you've considered. Yes, the Leviathan can serve as a defensive platform. But it's also a testament to what's possible when we refuse to accept limitations." She tapped a control panel, and the viewport changed to show other parts of the vast vessel. Research laboratories where scientists worked on technologies beyond current galactic standards, habitation zones where families lived in environments more hospitable than many planets, agricultural sections that produced food with unprecedented efficiency. We built this not just to protect ourselves, but to advance, to explore, to survive whatever the universe throws at us next. High Counselor Yul's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. "The Council's decision stands. Admiral, we request the immediate cessation of this project and any similar endeavors." Kim smiled, though there was little warmth in it. "With respect, Counselor, that's not going to happen. The Leviathan is operational. It will remain so, and it's not the last project of its kind that we will undertake. You risk isolation from the galactic community," warned the silver-skinned alien. "Trade restrictions, technology embargoes." "Perhaps," acknowledged Kim. "But history suggests isolation merely encourages human innovation. We've faced worse challenges." The meeting concluded shortly after. The atmosphere was tense but not hostile. As the delegation prepared to depart, High Counselor Yul approached Kim privately. "You are making a mistake, Admiral," he said quietly. "The Council has maintained peace for thousands of years through careful balance." Kim looked at the ancient being with genuine respect. Sometimes balance needs disruption to find a new equilibrium. Perhaps this is one of those times. She watched from the observation deck as the shuttle departed, growing smaller against the stars until it was just another point of light. Director Lee joined her in silence. "They'll be back," Lee said finally. "And not with words next time." "I know," replied Kim. "That's why we built this in the first place." As if responding to her thoughts, the great engines of the Leviathan hummed to life, vibrating gently through the deck beneath their feet. The former planet moved slightly, adjusting its position with a precision that would have been deemed impossible just years earlier. The delegation had departed without achieving their objective, and humanity had made it clear they were just getting started. The blockade materialized with stunning speed. Within 3 days of the failed diplomatic mission, thousands of ships had taken position at the key transit points around Earth's solar system. They formed a perfect web of overlapping sensor fields and weapons ranges. The message was clear: nothing would enter or leave human space without the Galactic Council's approval. In Earth's Defense Command Center, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, military leaders from all human nations gathered around a holographic display of the blockade. The mood was grim. 17 different species, reported General Song, pointing to clusters of ships with different designs. Most of them have never cooperated militarily before. They must be truly frightened of us. Admiral Kim stood silently, studying the patterns. After 3 days without sleep, her eyes were red-rimmed, but her mind remained sharp. She had expected this response from the Council, though not quite so quickly. "Can the Leviathan break through?" asked President Wu, her face tight with concern. Kim shook her head. It could, but at great cost. The Leviathan was built for endurance, not speed. They would damage it significantly before it cleared the blockade. "Then we're trapped," said Defense Minister Ba. "All our trade routes cut. Our colonies and other systems isolated." Kim allowed a small smile to form on her lips. "No, we're not trapped. We're exactly where we need to be." She nodded to Communications Director Yoon, who entered a 12-digit code into his console. The large screen at the front of the command center switched to a live feed from a location that few in the room had known existed until this moment. The image showed a massive control room, similar to the one aboard the Leviathan, but with key differences. The personnel wore different uniforms. The viewports looked out not at Mercury's transformed surface, but at what appeared to be a massive asteroid. "What are we seeing?" asked President Wu. "Project Constellation," replied Kim. "Mercury wasn't our only initiative. While all eyes were on the Leviathan, we proceeded with other conversions beyond Neptune's orbit." The screen split into 4 sections, each showing a different control room. In each, human crews worked at stations surrounding central command chairs. Ceres, Vesta, Pallas, and Hygeia. Kim identified each asteroid. Smaller than Mercury, but built on the same principles. "We call them pocket dreadnoughts." Defense Minister Ba stood abruptly. "How was this authorized without full council approval?" "It wasn't," Kim admitted. "After the success of the Mercury prototype, I made a command decision. These vessels were built using resources from the outer system, with crews volunteering under special classification." "That's borderline treason," whispered Ba. "It's survival," countered Kim. "And now, it's our leverage." She turned to Communications Director Yoon again. "Activate Constellation Protocol Alpha. Standard deployment pattern." On the main tactical display, new signals suddenly appeared. 4 large objects moving at incredible speeds from beyond Neptune's orbit. They traveled on courses that completely bypassed the blockade, using little-known gravitational corridors that Council ships hadn't fought to monitor. Within hours, reports began flooding in from the blockade commanders. The pocket dreadnoughts had emerged from hyperspace near the home worlds of the species participating in the blockade. They weren't attacking, merely positioning themselves in high orbit, their weapon systems powered down but visibly present. "They're in position," reported General Song. "All 4 vessels report normal operations. No aggressive response yet from planetary defense forces." Admiral Kim nodded and moved to the communication station. "Open a channel. All frequencies, all languages, maximum distribution." When the signal indicator lit green, she stood straight, facing the camera. "This is Admiral Kim of Earth Defense Force broadcasting on all frequencies," she began, her voice calm and measured. "To the Galactic Council and all species participating in the blockade of human space, I send greetings." She paused for a moment, letting the image of her, a small, aging human female, transmit across thousands of light years. "As you have now discovered, the Leviathan was not our only project. The vessels currently in position near your core worlds are similar in design but scaled appropriately. They carry no invasion forces, They have no hostile intent. On a secondary screen, Kim could see frantic communications between council ships as they processed this unexpected development. "We have no desire for conflict," she continued. "But we will not be contained. Humanity has developed along a different path than many species in the galaxy. Our approach to engineering, to scale, to possibility. These differences should be cause for collaboration, not confrontation." She gestured to a star chart beside her. "The galaxy is vast enough for different approaches to coexist. We propose an immediate summit to establish mutual understanding, not as subordinates being instructed by the Council, but as equals with different perspectives to contribute." Kim leaned slightly closer to the camera. "The blockade serves no one's interests. It threatens stability rather than preserving it. I ask that all ships return to their normal patrol routes while we prepare for productive discussions." She ended the transmission and turned to face the assembled human leadership. "They'll never agree," said Defense Minister Ba. "You've just escalated the situation." "No," replied President Wu thoughtfully. "She's given them a face-saving way to retreat. The question is whether they're wise enough to take it." The answer came more quickly than anyone expected. Within 30 minutes, the Council's flagship transmitted a response. High Counselor Yul himself appeared on screen, his crystalline form vibrating with barely contained emotion. "Admiral Kim," he said stiffly, "the Council acknowledges receipt of your message. We find your actions deeply concerning but recognize the reality of our current situation." He paused, clearly choosing his next words carefully. "Your proposal for a summit has merit. We will withdraw the blockade as a demonstration of good faith. Coordinates for a neutral meeting location will follow." The transmission ended abruptly. On the tactical display, Council ships began breaking formation, moving away from their blockade positions in perfect coordination. "They're actually leaving," whispered General Song in disbelief. "Of course they are," replied Kim. "They just realized we're not the primitives they thought we were." President Wu approached Kim, her expression a mix of admiration and concern. "You took an enormous risk, Admiral. If they had called our bluff—" "It wasn't a bluff," Kim interrupted gently. "The pocket dreadnoughts have enough power to disable planetary defense systems if necessary. We never would have fired first, but they didn't know that." "And now?" asked Defense Minister Ba, his earlier anger replaced by cautious respect. "Now we prepare for real diplomacy," said Kim. "They see us differently today than they did yesterday. Sometimes respect must be earned before understanding can begin." Within hours, the blockade had completely dispersed. The pocket dreadnoughts remained in position as a precaution, but powered down their primary systems in a gesture of goodwill. Across human space, celebrations broke out as news spread of the confrontation and its peaceful resolution. In her private quarters that night, Admiral Kim finally allowed herself a moment of rest. Looking out at the stars, she wondered what her ancestors would think of how far humanity had come, and how far they still had to go. The galaxy had never encountered a species quite like humans before, and humans had never faced the challenge of fitting into a community of thousands of different civilizations. Both sides had much to learn. But for now, they had earned the right to be heard. And in the end, that was all Admiral Kim had truly wanted. A chance to show that humanity's different path might lead to destinations worth exploring together. 5 years passed quickly. The once threatening Mercury dreadnought, the Leviathan, now hosted the largest diplomatic gathering in recent galactic history. The Great Hall, originally designed as a strategic command center, had been transformed into a summit venue. Representatives from over 400 species filled the space, their diverse forms creating a living mosaic of galactic life. Ambassador Han, formerly Admiral Kim, stood at the center platform. At 61, she moved more slowly now, but her eyes remained sharp and alert. The transition from military leader to diplomat had suited her well. "Welcome to the 5th Annual Galactic Collaboration Summit," Han announced, her voice carrying through the hall. "When we gathered for the first time, Many of us sat on opposite sides of a conflict. Today, we sit together as partners in discovery. The memory of the blockade and standoff had faded somewhat, though not entirely. Some species still viewed humans with caution. Others had embraced the partnership with surprising enthusiasm. High Engineer Traz of the Mechanical Collective approached Han after the opening ceremony. His body was a perfect blend of biological and mechanical parts, representing the peak of his species' evolution. "Ambassador Han," Traz said, his voice precisely modulated. "My team has completed our 5th analysis of your Mercury vessel." "And?" Han asked with a small smile. She already knew what was coming. "The principles should be impossible," admitted Traz, his mechanical eyes adjusting focus. "And yet," he gestured at the vast structure around them, "here we stand inside the impossible." Han guided Traz toward a viewport showing Earth in the distance. "Would you like to know the secret?" "Please," said Traz. Several nearby representatives drifted closer, equally curious. "Our species evolved amid constant threats," Han explained. "Predators, natural disasters, diseases, and eventually our own weapons. We survived by thinking beyond limitations. Where you see inefficiency, we see redundancy. Where you see excess, we see certainty." Counselor Yule joined them, his crystalline form now familiar to most humans. The former adversary had become one of their strongest allies. "The most fascinating aspect," Yule added, "is how quickly humans implement theoretical concepts. Most species spend generations debating what humans simply attempt. Sometimes we fail spectacularly," Han acknowledged with a laugh. "Our history is filled with magnificent failures, but we learn from each one." The summit's main purpose was to establish new protocols for megastructure development. After initial fear of human capabilities, many species had expressed interest in similar projects, though often with different approaches. In the Technology Exchange Hall, human engineers demonstrated construction techniques that had made the Leviathan possible. In return, ancient civilizations shared knowledge of sustainable energy systems and materials science that humans had never considered. "Your fusion reactors produce tremendous power," explained scientist Quan of the Elder Worlds to a group of human engineers. "But they create waste heat that requires massive cooling systems. Our crystalline fusion approach produces only 60% of your output, but generates almost no waste heat." Engineer Jun, one of the original Leviathan designers, examined the schematics with wonder. "This would solve our biggest maintenance challenge. We could reduce the cooling infrastructure by 80%. "Precisely," said Quan. "And we could adapt your power amplification techniques to increase our output beyond current limitations." Similar exchanges happened throughout the summit. The Aquatic Alliance shared water recycling systems far more efficient than human designs. The Photonic Collective offered communication technologies that worked across dimensions humans had barely begun to understand. In turn, humans shared their unique approach to problem solving, tackling challenges with overwhelming force rather than elegant efficiency. For many species, this perspective was revolutionary. "We've always sought to use the minimum necessary resources," explained Representative Mock of the Swarm Consciousness. "Your willingness to commit excess capacity creates possibilities we never considered viable." Not everyone embraced the changing relationship. Some council members still viewed humans as dangerous upstarts. During a closed session on the summit's 3rd day, several representatives raised concerns. "They build too quickly, with too little consideration," argued Councillor Liu. 3 more planet-sized vessels are already under construction in their system. Where does it end? Ambassador Han addressed the concern directly. "Those vessels aren't weapons," she explained. "They're exploration ships designed to push beyond the known galaxy. And for the first time, they're being built with combined knowledge and crews from multiple species." She displayed images of the construction sites where humans worked alongside aliens, incorporating technologies from a dozen different civilizations. "These aren't human ships. They're galactic ships." Yeol, now one of Han's strongest supporters in the council, added his perspective. We feared what humanity might do with their approach to scale. Now we see the possibilities when that approach is combined with our knowledge. The tide of opinion gradually shifted. By the summit's final day, over 30 species had signed agreements to participate in joint megastructure projects. Humans would provide the bold vision and construction techniques. Other species would contribute refinements that would make the structures more efficient and sustainable. On the closing night, a celebration filled the Great Hall. Music from dozens of worlds played as representatives mingled freely. Ambassador Han found herself standing at a viewport with High Engineer Traz and Counselor Yul, looking out at the stars. "I never thought I'd say this," admitted Yul, "but I'm glad you refused to dismantle this vessel 5 years ago." Han smiled. "Sometimes the greatest understanding comes after the greatest disagreements." "What will you build next?" asked Traz, always focused on the technical challenges. Han pointed to a distant star cluster barely visible from their position. There, beyond the known trade routes, the first joint species exploration vessel leaves next year. It carries scientists from 72 civilizations, including mine, confirmed Traz. "My daughter volunteered for the crew." Han turned to him in surprise. "I didn't know." "She was inspired by your speech at last year's summit," Traz explained, "about refusing to accept limitations. It's not how our species typically thinks, but perhaps that's why it resonated with her." As the celebration continued around them, Han reflected on how completely their relationship with the galaxy had transformed. What began as fear had evolved into cautious respect, and now into true collaboration. The galaxy had learned that humanity's approach wasn't wrong, just different. Some species evolved toward efficiency and conservation. Humans evolved to overcome through determination and scale. Both paths had value. Outside the viewport, Earth shone as a small blue dot in the distance. Soon, the new vessels would depart, carrying the combined knowledge of dozens of species united in understanding what was possible when different approaches worked together. "We were fortunate," Yul said quietly, "that your species chose to build rather than destroy." "It was always about survival," Han replied. "We just needed to prove we belonged among the stars." "You've done more than that," said Traz. "You've shown us all new ways to reach them." As the summit concluded, the Leviathan adjusted its position slightly, its massive engines glowing with a combination of human power and alien efficiency, a perfect symbol of what was possible when fear gave way to understanding.